Welcome to the True Crime Studio. Rich businessman abandoned his wife years later, shocked to see her at the airport. In this riveting video, we delve into the shocking story of a wealthy businessman who made headlines by abandoning his devoted wife. Discover the intricate details behind his controversial decision and the impact it had on both their lives. This is a tale that challenges perceptions of loyalty, ambition, and the cost of success.
And is shocked. The echo of Simone Bennett's heels reverberated through the corridors of JFK Airport as she walked determinedly towards the boarding gate. Her fingers tightly gripped the strap of her Hermes bag, a gift she had bought for herself when her company, Wellness Revolution, reached its first million in sales. The gesture was more than just a purchase. It was a constant reminder of her transformation. 5 years had passed since that fateful evening at Le Bernardin restaurant, when Leonardo Martinez, with his usual arrogance, destroyed what was left of her self-esteem. "You're exotic, Simone," he had said, twirling his glass of red wine between his fingers, "but you don't have the refined beauty I need by my side to conquer the world I long for." The sound of those words still echoed in her mind, but now, instead of pain, they provoked a wry smile. Simone adjusted the impeccable white blazer over the black dress that hugged her curves with elegance. Her natural curls, which Leonardo had insisted she straighten, now framed her face with pride and power. "Miss Bennett!" The familiar voice of her assistant, Lucy, brought her back to the present. "Mr. Anderson has just confirmed that he will be arriving in 20 minutes. He asked me to meet him in the executive lounge." Ethan Anderson. The name made her heart race slightly. In a year's relationship, he had proved to be everything Leonardo wasn't. Respectful, genuine, and, above all, someone who saw her as an equal. The CEO of Anderson Global Enterprises had built his clean tech empire on ethics and vision, values that aligned perfectly with hers. As she made her way to the lounge, Simone reflected on how her life had changed. Wellness Revolution, her natural products and wellness supplements company, was about to close an international partnership that would multiply its market value. It was an achievement she would never have imagined possible in the days when she reduced herself to fit Leonardo's standards. The executive lounge was practically empty at that time of the morning. Simone chose a seat near the window, from where she could watch the planes taking off and landing, a spectacle that always fascinated her. She took out her tablet to review the last details of the performance she was going to give in Los Angeles. "Sorry I'm late, my love." Ethan's deep, warm voice filled the room. He leaned in to kiss her, and Simone smelled the familiar scent she loved so much. Traffic was impossible on the FDR Drive. "You arrived just in time," she smiled, losing herself for a moment in his blue eyes. "Our flight doesn't leave for 40 minutes. It was then that fate decided to play its trick. A familiar buzz caught Simone's attention, and her whole body froze as she recognized the voice. Leonardo Martinez was entering the lounge, talking loudly on the phone as he always did to make sure everyone noticed him. Time seemed to have been kind to him, the same impeccable Italian suit, the same studied gestures, but there was something different about his eyes, a shadow that Simone didn't recognize. When their gazes met, she saw the shock run across his face. Leonardo ended the call abruptly, his eyes switching between Simone and Ethan, who was now standing protectively beside her. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but for Simone, it felt like an eternity. She could feel the weight of Leonardo's gaze, a mixture of surprise, anger, and something akin to regret. "Simone." He pronounced her name as if to test whether he still had the same power over her. What a pleasant surprise. Ethan, sensing the tension in Simone's body, gently put his hand on her waist. "We need to get on board, darling," he said, his voice calm but firm. Simone nodded, maintaining the composure she had cultivated over the years. "Leonardo," she replied with a brief nod, her voice betraying no emotion. As they walked away, Simone could feel Leonardo's gaze burning into her back. What she didn't know was that this chance encounter would trigger a series of events that would test everything she had built up. On the way to the boarding gate, Ethan gently squeezed her hand. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she replied, and for the first time in her life, it wasn't a lie. Meeting Leonardo hadn't destroyed her. On the contrary, it had confirmed how much she had grown. But as she boarded the plane, Simone couldn't ignore that uneasy feeling in the pit of her stomach. She knew Leonardo too well to know that he wouldn't leave it at that. For him, seeing her successful and happy alongside someone like Ethan Anderson would be a blow that would be hard to accept. The plane began to taxi down the runway, and Simone closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Her life was too perfect to be disturbed by ghosts from the past, but a voice in her mind whispered that that encounter at the airport was just the beginning of something much bigger. Leonardo Martinez watched the plane take off through the huge windows of the executive lounge, his fingers drumming nervously against the glass of whiskey he had ordered moments after the meeting. The sight of Simone, radiant and confident next to Ethan Anderson, had awakened something visceral inside him, a toxic mix of wounded pride and obsession with control. Picking up his phone, he dialed quickly. "Richard, I need a full investigation into Wellness Revolution. I want to know everything: financials, outstanding contracts, weaknesses, especially its founder, Simone Bennett." He paused, taking a sip of his drink. "And yes, I want information about your relationship with Ethan Anderson." Meanwhile, miles away, Simone tried to concentrate on the documents on her laptop, but her mind kept going back to the meeting at the airport. Ethan, noticing her restlessness, gently closed the computer screen. "You never told me all the details about him," said Ethan softly, "but I recognize that look. Leonardo Martinez is more than an ex-boyfriend, isn't he?" Simone took a deep breath, settling into her seat in first class. "Leonardo was my first lesson in how power can corrupt," she began. "When we first met, I was just a junior consultant, impressed by his charisma and promises of a bright future." She paused, remembering the early days. "At first, he showed me off like an exotic trophy at his social events. But gradually, he began to shape every aspect of my life. My hair, my clothes, even the way I spoke. It was subtle, always disguised as concern for my social evolution. Classic control disguised as love," Ethan commented, his voice laden with understanding. "Exactly," Simone agreed. "The final straw was when he suggested that I should consider minor surgery to refine my nose. He said it would be better for my acceptance in the circles he frequented." In his Manhattan office, Leonardo frantically scoured articles about Simone. Her transformation was impressive, from junior consultant to CEO of a company worth millions. The photos showed a completely different woman from the one he had known: powerful, confident, undeniably successful. "Mr. Martinez," his secretary interrupted his thoughts, "LM Ventures lost another 15% on the market today. The investors are demanding an emergency meeting." Leonardo dismissed the secretary with an irritated gesture. His risky financial decisions of recent years were taking their toll. Watching Simone prosper while her own empire began to crumble was unbearable. Back on the plane, Simone continued her story. "After we broke up, I promised myself that I would never again allow anyone to define my worth. I invested my savings in research and development, worked days and nights, and built Wellness Revolution from scratch." Ethan held his hand, his eyes revealing sincere admiration. "And now you're about to close one of the biggest partnerships in the industry. You're extraordinary, Simone." What they didn't know was that Leonardo was already weaving his web. On his phone, a message from Richard flashed up. "I found something interesting about Wellness Revolution's international partnership. There's a vulnerability we can exploit." On the roof of his apartment that evening, Leonardo was studying the documents sent by Richard. A mischievous smile formed on his lips when he found exactly what he was looking for: a small contractual loophole that could devastate Simone's plans. "For you may have turned, darling," he muttered to himself, "but you've forgotten that I know all your secrets, and more importantly, I know exactly how to destroy everything you've built." In Los Angeles, Simone and Ethan arrived at the Millennium Biltmore Hotel. As she was getting ready for bed, Simone received a notification on her cell phone, an anonymous email containing just one line: "Some transformations are only superficial, aren't they?" Her heart raced as she recognized the writing style. Leonardo had always had a gift for veiled threats. He deleted the email but knew it was only the beginning. She looked at Ethan, who was engrossed in a business call, and felt a twinge of fear, not for herself, but for what Leonardo could do to destroy her hard-won happiness. The next morning, as she prepared for the presentation that could change the future of her company, Simone had no idea that Leonardo had already planted the seeds that would threaten not only her business, but also her own emotional freedom. The battle to come would test not only her strength, but also her ability to trust in the true love she had finally found. The auditorium of the Los Angeles Convention Center was packed when Simone took the stage. Under the bright lights, she emanated confidence in her vibrant red suit, her magnetic presence instantly capturing the attention of every executive present. Wellness Revolution is not just a company, her voice rang out loud and clear. It's a commitment to authentic and sustainable transformation. As she presented the impressive growth figures and the vision for the international partnership, Simone noticed a restless movement at the back of the room. Her heart almost stopped. Leonardo Martinez slipped discreetly into a seat in the back row, his enigmatic smile sending shivers down her spine. Shouldn't he be in New York? His presence there couldn't be a coincidence. Keeping her composure, Simone continued her presentation, but her mind was working frantically. Over the years, she had learned to read Leonardo's signals. He never did anything without a calculated purpose. After the presentation, while receiving greetings from potential partners, Simone felt her phone vibrate. A message from Rebecca, her best friend and financial director of Wellness Revolution. "We need to talk. Urgent." In the private corridor, Rebecca was waiting for her with a worried expression. "Simone, I've just had a strange call. Someone is asking questions about our negotiations in Asia, specifically about supplier certifications." Simone felt her stomach sink. Asian supplier certifications were the only vulnerable point in their operation, a detail that only people very close to the business knew about, or someone who had privileged access to the information. "Leonardo is here," Simone revealed, her voice low, "and I'm sure that's no coincidence." "That Leonardo?" Rebecca frowned. "Simone, he's lost millions in the last few weeks. LM Ventures is on the brink of a financial scandal. Maybe he's looking for a way to get back on his feet," Simone added, the pieces falling into place in her mind. On the other side of the convention center, Leonardo was conducting his own meeting with Richard Thompson, his private investigator. "Wellness Revolution's main suppliers in Asia are operating with pending certifications," Richard explained, sliding a folder across the table. "If this information leaks out before the partnership is closed, their reputation crumbles," Leonardo added, a predatory glint in his eyes. "And the best thing, it will look like an accidental leak of information." Meanwhile, Ethan found Simone in the hotel cafe. Sensing her tension, he gently took her hands. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" Simone hesitated. How to explain that her psychopathic ex-boyfriend was potentially planning to destroy everything she had built? How to admit that, even after 5 years, there were still vulnerabilities in her business that could be exploited? "Ethan," she began, but was interrupted by Leonardo himself, who casually appeared in the cafeteria. "What a wonderful coincidence," he exclaimed, his voice brimming with false cordiality. "Simone, your presentation was impressive. You've really outdone yourself since, well, you know." Ethan stood up, his posture protective. "Mr. Martinez, what a surprise to find you so far from New York." "Business takes us to unexpected places," Leonardo replied, his eyes fixed on Simone. "Sometimes we need to go back to the past to build a better future." Simone remained calm, years of corporate experience masking her discomfort. "The past is exactly where it belongs, Leonardo. If you'll excuse us, we have an important meeting." As they walked away, Leonardo called out, "Ah, Simone, that project in Asia. Fascinating. I hope everything is properly documented." The comment hit Simone like a punch in the gut. He knew it. Somehow, Leonardo had found out about the pending certifications. Back in his hotel room, Simone immediately called Daniel Harrison, his lawyer. "I need you to review all our contracts with Asian suppliers, right away." "Simone," Ethan intervened gently, "you need to tell me what's going on. I can't help if I don't know what we're up against." She looked out of the hotel window, watching the lights of Los Angeles. How had she allowed such a crucial vulnerability to persist in her company? The answer was painfully simple: misplaced trust in people who promised to resolve the situation. "Leonardo isn't here by chance," she finally admitted. "He's discovered something that could jeopardize everything I've built. And knowing him as I do, he won't stop until he gets what he wants." "And what exactly does he want?" Ethan asked, although he already suspected the answer. "Control," Simone replied, her voice laden with determination. "But this time, I'm prepared to fight. I'm no longer the woman he could manipulate." What Simone didn't know was that, at that very moment, Leonardo was sending anonymous emails to the main financial media outlets, planting the seeds of doubt about Wellness Revolution's integrity. The war was just beginning, and the battlefield would be much larger than she had imagined. The morning in Los Angeles dawned with news that made Simone's heart freeze. "Wellness Revolution's business practices questioned," headlined the Wall Street Journal. The article, although carefully worded to avoid direct accusations, raised doubts about the legitimacy of the company's Asian operations. In her room at the Millennium Biltmore, Simone watched her team work frantically to control the damage. Rebecca coordinated calls with the lawyers, while Daniel Harrison, her legal advisor, analyzed every word of the article in search of possible legal action. "The investors are nervous," Rebecca reported, hanging up another call. "3 of them have already requested emergency meetings, and Maxwell Corp is considering postponing the signing of the partnership." Simone kept her composure, but inside, her blood was boiling. Leonardo's strategy was brilliant in its ruthlessness. He knew exactly where to strike, to cause maximum damage with minimum personal exposure. "Miss Bennett," called Lucy, his assistant, entering hastily. "Mr. Williams from Maxwell Corp is on the line. He insists on speaking to you personally." Before Simone could reply, her phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. "Coffee in 30 minutes. Rooftop at the Standard. Come alone, L." Tamaz, Ethan, who was watching everything in silence, noticed the sudden change in Simone's expression. "He got in touch, didn't he?" "Yes," she replied, showing him the message. "And I think it's time to face him." "Don't go alone," Ethan warned. "Leonardo is dangerous when he feels cornered. And with LM Ventures in crisis—" "That's exactly why I need to go," Simone interrupted. "I know Leonardo. He wants a show. He wants to see me begging. But I'm going to give him something completely different." On the rooftop of the Standard Hotel, Leonardo was waiting, impeccable in his Italian suit, gazing out at the city below. When he heard the sound of Simone's heels, a satisfied smile appeared on his lips. "Punctual as always," he commented without turning around. "Let's get straight to the point, Leonardo," Simone said, her voice firm. "What do you want?" He finally turned around, his eyes studying her every detail. "You know what fascinates me most, Simone? How you've managed to reinvent yourself so completely. From the insecure girl I knew to the powerful CEO. You've almost convinced me. I'm not here for a trip back in time." "No," he laughed softly. "It's funny how the past has a habit of catching up with us, like those Asian certifications you neglected. An amateur mistake, I must say. If you think you can blackmail me—" "Blackmail?" Leonardo feigned surprise. "I'm just worried about your reputation. After all, what would Ethan Anderson think if he found out that his girlfriend had built an empire on dubious documentation?" Simone felt her heart racing but kept her expression neutral. "You really haven't changed at all, Leonardo. You're still the same small man, trying to feel big by belittling others. I have a proposal for you," he continued, ignoring her comment. "LM Ventures could absorb Wellness Revolution. I'd take operational control, discreetly resolve the issue of certifications, and you'd retain your position of prominence. We could even rekindle old flames." At that moment, Simone did something that surprised even herself. She laughed. A genuine laugh, free of fear or hesitation. "Do you know what your biggest mistake was, Leonardo? Thinking you still know me. The Simone you could manipulate no longer exists. What about the certifications? They've been regularized for weeks. I just needed confirmation that you were behind the leak." Leonardo's smile faltered slightly. "You're bluffing." "Check your email," she replied calmly. "I've just forwarded all the documentation to the press, along with proof of your attempted sabotage, including those anonymous emails you've been sending." Leonardo paled visibly. "You wouldn't do that. Not the old Simone, but as you said yourself, I've completely reinvented myself." Leaving a stunned Leonardo behind, Simone walked to the elevator. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her heart was light. For the first time, she had faced not only Leonardo, but her own inner demons. Back at the Biltmore, Ethan was waiting for her anxiously. "How was it?" "Liberating," she replied, finally allowing herself to relax in his arms. "But the war isn't over. Leonardo is like a wounded snake, more dangerous when cornered." That night, as Los Angeles sparkled outside, Simone knew she had won an important battle. But the war was far from over. Leonardo would not accept defeat easily, and she needed to be prepared for what came next. But this time, she wasn't alone in the fight. In his office, Leonardo watched the city with cold eyes, his phone ringing incessantly with calls from journalists. He had underestimated Simone, but his arsenal of secrets was not yet exhausted. If she wanted war, that was exactly what she would get. The Californian afternoon sun bathed the Maxwell Corp meeting room as Simone finalized the last details of the international partnership. Her victory over Leonardo on the rooftop had given her strength. but it had also left her in a state of constant alert. She knew her ex too well to believe that he would simply give up. "The documents are in order, Miss Bennett," announced Gregory Maxwell, CEO of Maxwell Corp., a grey-haired gentleman with piercing eyes. "I must admit I was worried by the recent rumors, but your transparency in handling the situation was impressive." While signing the contracts, Simone felt her phone vibrate. A message from Rebecca. "We need to talk. I found out something about the company's initial investments." Discomfort settled in her stomach. The initial investments were a dark chapter in her history, a period when, still vulnerable after her breakup with Leonardo, she had accepted financial help from sources she hadn't properly investigated. Across town, Leonardo was smiling on the phone. "So she really doesn't know about the origin of that initial money?" he asked Richard Thompson. "Interesting, very interesting." "No, sir," replied Richard. "The ghost investor we used at the time kept her anonymity. She never knew that the money came indirectly from you." Leonardo savored the information like a fine wine. "Prepare the documents. I want everything ready for when the time is right." Back at the Biltmore, Simone found Rebecca waiting in her suite. Her friend and CFO seemed nervous, something rare for someone who was always so controlled. "What did you find out?" Simone asked, pouring herself a glass of water. "I did a full audit after the supplier information was leaked," Rebecca began hesitantly, "and I found something strange in the 2019 records. The initial investment of $2 million... Simone, the money came from an offshore company that has links to LM Ventures." The glass of water slipped from Simone's fingers, shattering on the floor. "Impossible," she whispered. "I checked everything at the time. The investor was a legitimate venture capital fund." "It was a very elaborate front," Rebecca explained, showing the documents on her tablet. "Leonardo must have planned this from the start, as insurance for the future." At that moment, Ethan entered the suite, his expression worried. "I've just had an interesting call," he said. "Leonardo is spreading rumors in the market about possible irregularities in Wellness Revolution's investments." Simone sat down heavily, her mind processing the implications. Her entire empire, built with so much sacrifice, could crumble if this information came to light. Not only would he lose credibility, but he could face serious charges of fraud. "He planned this for years," he muttered. "Even after we broke up, he kept manipulating me without me knowing." "There is a solution," Ethan offered cautiously. "Anderson Global could buy that problematic stake, clear any connection with Leonardo." "No," Simone replied firmly. "I can't depend on another man to save me. I've already made that mistake once." Rebecca sniffed softly. "There is another option. We can trace the path of the money, prove that Leonardo deliberately concealed his involvement. That would put him in a very delicate position with the SEC." While they were discussing strategies, Simone's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but she knew exactly who it was. "Have you found my little present yet?" Leonardo's voice sounded soft, almost gentle. $2 million. It was my investment in your future, darling. Too bad you never truly appreciated my generosity." "What do you want, Leonardo?" "The same proposal as before, but now with one small change. You have 24 hours to accept the merger with LM Ventures, or everyone will know that the mighty Simone Bennett built her empire with dirty money." After hanging up, Simone remained silent for long moments. Finally, she raised her eyes to meet the worried gazes of Ethan and Rebecca. "He wants war," she said, her voice laden with determination. "Then that's exactly what you're going to get. Rebecca, contact our lawyers. Ethan, I need you to use your contacts at the SEC. It's time to expose all of Leonardo's schemes, not just those related to Wellness Revolution." "Are you sure?" Ethan asked. "This could get very ugly." "I'm tired of being the victim in this story," Simone replied, standing up. "Leonardo has always operated in the shadows, manipulating people and situations. It's time to bring everything to light." As night fell over Los Angeles, 3 different strategies were hatched. In his office, Leonardo savored his apparent victory. In a discreet meeting room, Rebecca and a team of lawyers were designing a meticulous legal counterattack, and on the terrace of the Biltmore, Simone and Ethan planned how to turn the biggest threat to Wellness Revolution into their greatest opportunity for liberation. The next move would define not only the future of the company, but also who Simone really was, the woman Leonardo tried to mold, or the one who emerged stronger from every challenge. The law firm Blackwood & Associates occupied 3 floors of an imposing building in downtown Los Angeles. That morning, Simone watched the city through the conference room windows as her legal team dissected every document related to Wellness Revolution's initial investment. "The scheme is more complex than we imagined," explained Michelle Blackwood, a renowned corporate lawyer. "Leonardo created a network of shell companies to mask the origin of the money, but he made a crucial mistake. He left digital traces." Rebecca projected a series of diagrams onto the screen. "We discovered suspicious transfers between LM Ventures and several offshore accounts in the months leading up to the initial investment, all coinciding with periods of financial instability in his company. He wasn't just manipulating me," Simone concluded, her voice laden with understanding. "He was laundering money through my company." The silence that followed was interrupted by the arrival of Ethan, who brought new information from his contacts at the SEC. "Leonardo isn't just targeting you, Simone. He's been doing this with several startups over the last 5 years. It's a pattern." Meanwhile, in LM Ventures' New York office, Leonardo was receiving disturbing news. "Sir," his assistant stammered, "someone is investigating the offshore transactions. The SEC has requested specific documents on the 2019 investments." Leonardo remained outwardly calm, but his fingers gripped the edge of the desk. "Get in touch with our accountants. I want all the records amended by the end of the day." Back in Los Angeles, Simone gathered her team to define the strategy. "We can't just expose Leonardo," she explained. "We need to make sure that Wellness Revolution survives this." "I have an idea," Rebecca interjected. "What if we used his own greed against himself?" The plan began to take shape. While the legal team prepared the necessary paperwork, Simone received an unexpected call from Victoria Chen, a former LM Ventures employee who had been mysteriously fired years ago. "Miss Bennett," Victoria spoke hesitantly, "I hear you're up against Leonardo Martinez. I have some information that might help." The meeting was arranged for that afternoon in the garden of the Hotel Figueroa. Victoria, a woman in her mid-40s with eyes that carried the weight of long-kept secrets, had brought an old folder with her. "Leonardo didn't start with me," she revealed. "There were others before you. Talented women he manipulated, used and discarded, some to launder money, others to get inside information. I've kept records of everything since I left the company." Simone flipped through the documents, her stomach turning with each new revelation. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because you're the first one who's had the courage to stand up to him," Victoria replied simply, "and because it's time someone stopped Leonardo Martinez." Back at the Biltmore, Simone shared the new information with her team. The pattern was clear. Leonardo not only emotionally manipulated his victims, but used them as cogs in an elaborate financial fraud scheme. "This changes everything," Michelle declared. "With these documents and the traces we've found, we can not only defend ourselves, but bring down his entire empire." Ethan, who had remained pensive, finally spoke up. "There's something that worries me. Leonardo is a man in a corner now, and people like that are capable of anything." As if to confirm her fears, Simone's cell phone vibrated with a message from Leonardo. "Dinner. Tonight. 8 p.m. Tonight. 8 p.m. Chateau Marmont. Last chance to resolve this civilly." "You're not going," Ethan protested immediately. "I will," Simone replied, her voice firm, "but this time with all my cards up my sleeve." The next few hours were spent preparing every detail. Michelle ensured that all the documents were scanned and stored on multiple secure servers. Rebecca coordinated with the technical team to record every possible interaction. Victoria provided more details about Leonardo's previous schemes. At 7:45 p.m., Simone entered the Chateau Marmont. Her black dress, elegant and powerful, was a suit of armor. In her bag was a small tape recorder and all the documents that could destroy Leonardo. He was already waiting for her. Impeccable as always, but there was something different in his eyes, a dangerous glint of desperation. "You've always been the most special," he began, raising his wineglass. "That's why I kept you close, even after we broke up. That investment, it was my way of ensuring that our destinies remained intertwined." "No," Simone interrupted. "It was your way of continuing to control me, but that ends today." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside, copies of Victoria's documents, records of the offshore transactions, and a detailed report ready to be sent to the SEC. "You wouldn't do that," Leonardo hissed, his charm evaporating. "You'd destroy your own company." "Wellness Revolution will survive," Simone replied calmly. "As for LM Ventures, well, that's entirely up to you now." The silence that followed was deafening. At the next table, discreetly, An SEC agent was dining alone, waiting for the agreed signal. Leonardo's next move would determine not only his future, but the fate of his entire empire built on lies and manipulation. The Chateau Marmont stood in sepulchral silence as Leonardo examined the documents, his face alternating between shades of red and white. The glass of wine in front of him remained untouched, while his fingers trembled slightly as he turned each page. "You don't understand," he finally spoke, his voice a controlled whisper. "It wasn't just about you. It never was. It's a much bigger game." Simone leaned forward, keeping her voice low but firm. "No, Leonardo. You're the one who doesn't understand. The game is over." At that moment, her phone vibrated with a message from Rebecca. "SEC team in place. Original documents secured in 3 different locations. Victoria has just officially testified." "I have a counter-proposal," Leonardo said, regaining some of his composure. "Anderson Global. I know that Ethan is planning an expansion into Asia. I can offer contacts, open doors that even he couldn't." "Still trying to negotiate?" Simone allowed herself a small smile. "You really haven't changed at all." "On the contrary, dear," he replied, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "I've changed enough to know that if I fall, I won't fall alone. Do you have any idea how many important people are involved in my investments?" Simone felt a shiver run down her spine, but kept her expression neutral. At the next table, the SEC agent discreetly adjusted his tape recorder. "You know what's ironic," she began, swirling her sparkling water. "For years, you made me believe that I wasn't enough, that I needed to change to fit into your world, but in the end it was you who was building a house of cards." Leonardo leaned forward, his voice a hiss. "Don't test my patience, Simone. I can still destroy everything you've built." "No, you can't," she replied calmly, sliding another document across the table. "Because while you were busy threatening me, my team was tracking down every penny that has passed through your shell companies over the last 5 years. Leonardo's face paled as he recognized the numbers. They were records he believed he had destroyed, transactions that should remain buried forever. "How?" "Victoria kept copies of everything," Simone explained. "Every transfer, every front company, every victim you manipulated, and unlike me, she documented everything from the beginning." At that moment, Michelle Blackwood approached the table, accompanied by 2 federal agents. "Mr. Martinez," she said professionally, "I believe we have some matters to discuss." Leonardo looked around, like a cornered animal, before fixing his gaze on Simone. "You have no idea what you've just done." "On the contrary," she replied, standing up. "For the first time in years, I know exactly what I'm doing." As the agents discreetly escorted Leonardo out of the restaurant, Simone remained seated, finally allowing herself to let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her phone vibrated with a message from Ethan. "Is everything okay?" "It is now," she replied. Outside the Chateau Marmont, the Los Angeles night continued its dance of lights and shadows. Somewhere in the city, Rebecca was coordinating the protection of crucial documents. Elsewhere, Victoria was finalizing her official statement, and in a secure room, federal agents were beginning to unravel Leonardo Martinez's intricate web of fraud. Simone knew that the battle wasn't completely over. There would be consequences, investigations, and probably more attempts by Leonardo to get away with it. But for the first time since this whole story began, she felt truly free. Her phone rang again. It was Michelle. "The SEC wants your full statement early tomorrow morning. Are you ready?" "More than ever," Simone replied, watching the city lights through the restaurant window. Leonardo's empire was crumbling, but hers, built on solid foundations of truth and determination, would remain standing. The night was still long, and there was a lot of work ahead. But Simone Bennett had finally broken the last chains that bound her to her past. The future was now entirely hers to shape. The SEC deposition room in Los Angeles was stark and impersonal. Simone adjusted the microphone in front of her as she watched the 3 federal agents organize their notes. It was 7:30 in the morning, and the news of Leonardo Martinez's arrest was already beginning to circulate in the main financial media. "Please, Miss Bennett, start at the beginning," requested Agent Catherine Morris, a middle-aged woman with piercing eyes. "When exactly did you realize that the initial investment was problematic?" As Simone detailed the events of the last few days, her phone kept vibrating on silent mode. Leonardo's arrest was having a domino effect on the financial market. "Miss Bennett," interrupted Michelle Blackwood, who was following the testimony, Some urgent news has just arrived. The stock market opened with LM Ventures in free fall. Several important investors are jumping ship. The meeting was briefly interrupted when Rebecca burst into the room, iPad in hand. Simone, we need an immediate decision. 3 major investors in Wellness Revolution are threatening to withdraw their capital because of the Leonardo connection. Simone maintained her outward calm, even though her heart was racing. How much time do we have? The market closes in 6 hours, Rebecca replied. If we don't stabilize the situation by then... Excuse me, Simone turned to the agents. Can I make a quick call? In the hallway, she dialed Ethan's number. I need you to call a press conference, immediately. It's already being organized, he replied. The lobby of the Millennium Biltmore in 2 hours. Victoria has agreed to speak publicly. Back in the debriefing room, Simone resumed her account with renewed determination. Every detail she shared with the federal agents was another piece in the puzzle that revealed the true extent of Leonardo's crimes. At 11 a.m. sharp, the lobby of the Biltmore was packed with journalists. Simone took the podium, flanked by Victoria Chen and her legal team. The cameras were rolling incessantly. Good morning, she began, her voice firm. We are here to clarify the events that led to Leonardo Martinez's arrest and, more importantly, to ensure full transparency about the future of Wellness Revolution. As she spoke, explaining how her company had been unwittingly implicated in Leonardo's schemes and detailing the measures it was taking to ensure the integrity of its operations, Rebecca monitored the markets on her tablet. Slowly, Wellness Revolution's shares began to stabilize. Victoria was the next to speak, her voice trembling slightly as she revealed years of manipulation and fraud she had witnessed at LM Ventures. Her every word was another nail in the coffin of Leonardo's empire. At the end of the press conference, Michelle handed Simone a note. Leonardo is requesting your presence. He wants to make a deal. Simone crumpled up the paper. Tell him that any negotiations must be done through official channels. Back in her temporary office at the Biltmore, Simone found Ethan waiting with surprising news. Maxwell Corp has not only maintained the partnership, but wants to increase the investment. They were impressed with the way you handled the crisis. What about the other investors? She asked, allowing herself a moment of hope. Most of them are coming back, Rebecca replied, entering the room. Your honesty at the press conference did wonders for our credibility. That evening, alone in her suite, Simone finally allowed herself to process the day's events. Her phone rang. It was a number from the federal prison. You think you've won? Leonardo's voice sounded distant and bitter. But it's not over, Simone. You have no idea of the people you're going to face now. Yes, it is, Leonardo, she replied softly. And this time, forever. Hanging up the phone, she walked over to the window. Los Angeles shone under the night sky, a reminder that even on the darkest nights, there is light. Her empire hadn't just survived, it was stronger than ever. On his desk, a message from Rebecca flashed, "Emergency meeting tomorrow. New investors interested, and you won't believe who's leading the pack." Simone smiled. The storm had passed, but the next day promised new challenges, and this time she was more than prepared to face them. The next morning dawned with a different energy at the Biltmore Hotel. Simone adjusted her white blazer as she walked towards the main conference room, where Rebecca was waiting for her with the news about the new investors. Before you go in, Rebecca stopped her at the door. I need you to keep an open mind. The person leading the group of investors is Olivia Martinez. Simone froze. Leonardo's ex-wife. Inside the room, Olivia Martinez emanated a natural elegance in her navy blue suit. Her eyes, shrewd and determined, met Simone's with a mixture of respect and complicity. Miss Bennett? Olivia stood up to greet her. Or may I call you Simone? After all, we share more than we'd like in our stories. The next 2 hours were surprising. Olivia revealed how Leonardo had tried to destroy her career after the divorce, how she had quietly built up her own investment empire, and, most importantly, how she had monitored her ex-husband's activities over the last few years. When I saw you stand up to him publicly, Olivia explained, I knew it was time to act. I have a group of solid investors, people who have also been hurt by Leonardo over the years. We want to not only invest in Wellness Revolution, but form a strategic alliance. Rebecca projected the figures onto the screen. The proposed investment was substantial, enough to not only stabilize the company after the crisis, but propel it into global expansion. Why now? Simone asked directly. Because you did what none of us had the courage to do, Olivia replied. You exposed it, even though you knew you could lose everything. That's exactly the kind of leadership we want to support. As they discussed the details of the settlement, Ethan arrived with urgent news. The SEC has just released more evidence. Leonardo wasn't acting alone. There was a whole network of executives involved in his schemes. I know, Olivia interjected calmly, and I have documents proving every connection. I was saving this information for the right moment. The afternoon passed in a series of intense meetings. Michelle Blackwood and her legal team went over every detail of the new investment agreement, while Victoria Chen worked with the federal agents, connecting Olivia's new documents with the evidence already collected. At the end of the day, Simone found herself alone with Olivia on the hotel terrace. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. You know what's ironic? Olivia commented, looking out over the city. Leonardo always saw us as pieces in his game. He never imagined that we could be players on our own. Why didn't you expose him before? Simone asked. Timing, dear. Sometimes you have to let your enemy believe you're winning before you can defeat them completely. That evening, after finalizing the deal with Olivia's group, Simone reflected on how fate had curious ways of operating. Her phone vibrated with a message from Ethan. Dinner to celebrate. Not yet, she replied. I have one last thing to sort out. On her laptop, she began drafting an email to all the Wellness Revolution employees. It was time to share not only the news about the new investments, but also a clear vision of the future, a future built on true alliances and solid values. Leonardo's empire was still crumbling, but something much more powerful was rising from the ashes, a network of people determined to do business differently, led by women who had turned their scars into strength. The Wellness Revolution headquarters in Los Angeles was different that morning. The air seemed lighter, as if the whole building was breathing a sigh of relief after the storm that had passed. Simone walked through the corridors, looking at her employees with a new eye. They were more than a team, they were survivors. The third quarter figures have just come in, Rebecca announced, entering her office with a rarely seen smile. Not only have we regained lost ground, but the stock is up 30% since the announcement of the partnership with Olivia. Simone smiled, remembering the board meeting that morning. Olivia Martinez's presence had completely transformed the dynamics of the company. Her experience in international finance, combined with the investor group's global contacts, had opened doors that had previously seemed impossible to reach. Victoria called, Rebecca continued. 3 more LM Ventures executives were indicted this morning. Leonardo's network is completely falling apart. On the other side of town, Ethan was coordinating the merger of some operations between Anderson Global and Wellness Revolution. The synergy between the companies had proved more valuable than anyone could have predicted. Simone, he called in the middle of the afternoon, I've just left a meeting with the Stock Exchange Board. They want you to be the keynote speaker at their annual corporate governance conference. Ironic, she replied. A few weeks ago, they probably considered me a risk to the market. The day passed in a series of productive meetings. The new line of natural products was ready for launch, and the Asian certifications, now fully regularized, paved the way for unprecedented expansion. In the late afternoon, Simone found a moment to visit the Research and Development Lab, where her team was working on a new product line aimed specifically at women entrepreneurs, a project born out of her own experiences. Miss Bennett, a young researcher, approached her shyly. I read your story in Forbes this morning. You changed the way I see my own potential. Those words touched Simone deeply. Her fight against Leonardo had become something bigger than herself. It was a symbol of hope for other women facing their own demons in the corporate world. In her living room later, she found an elegant envelope on her desk. Inside was an invitation to a charity dinner organized by Olivia. The theme, Women Redefining Power. Her phone rang. It was Michelle Blackwood. Simone, Leonardo is requesting a plea bargain with the prosecution. He wants his sentence reduced in exchange for information about other corporate schemes. What does Olivia think about that? Simone asked. She says it's time to let him go down alone. We have enough evidence without needing your cooperation. Simone walked over to her living room window, watching the sun set over Los Angeles. The empire she had built had not only survived the storm, it had emerged stronger, more authentic. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from Ethan. Dinner at home tonight. I have a surprise for you. She smiled, feeling that familiar wave of gratitude for having found someone who celebrated her victories without trying to overshadow them. As she organized her belongings to leave, Simone reflected on how her life had changed in recent months. The nightmare with Leonardo had turned into an opportunity for growth not only for her, but for all the women her story inspired. Wellness Revolution was no longer just a company, it was a movement for transformation. Before leaving, she stopped to admire the new artwork on her wall, an abstract painting Ethan had given her, depicting a phoenix rising from the ashes. It was more than a decoration, it was a constant reminder of her own journey of rebirth. The morning began with news that made Simone smile. Wellness Revolution had been selected as one of the 50 most innovative companies by Forbes. The article highlighted not only the company's exponential growth, but also its new initiative, a mentoring program for women entrepreneurs. The Phoenix program already has over 1,000 applicants, Rebecca said, entering the room with her usual iPad. And Olivia suggested we expand it into an investment fund focused exclusively on startups led by women. Simone looked out of her office window at the new company logo shining at the top of the building, a stylized phoenix, symbolizing not only her own transformation, but that of all the women who were now part of her story. This arrived for you. Rebecca handed over an official envelope. It was a summons. Leonardo was asking for one last conversation before his final hearing. Are you going? Rebecca asked, worried. Yes, Simone replied, surprising herself. It's time to close this chapter for good. In the federal prison, Leonardo looked smaller, older. His Italian suit had been replaced by a prison uniform, and his once domineering eyes now avoided direct contact. Why did you call me here? Simone asked, keeping her distance. To warn you, he replied, his voice hoarse. There are powerful people who won't be happy with what you and Olivia are doing. You're changing rules that have existed for decades. That's exactly the point, Simone replied calmly. The world is changing, Leonardo, and this time it's women who are writing the rules. Back at the office, Simone found Ethan waiting with news of the merger of the international operations, but there was something else in his eyes. I have a proposal for you, he said, holding out a small velvet box. Before he could continue, Olivia burst into the room. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to act fast. I've just received information about an attempted cyber attack on our systems. The next few hours were intense. The digital security team worked tirelessly to protect the company's data, while Olivia coordinated an investigation into the source of the attack. It's only the beginning, Olivia commented, when they finally managed to contain the threat. The old system isn't going to crumble without a fight. That evening, in her apartment, Simone finally had a moment's peace to process the day's events. The small velvet box rested on her bedside table, still closed. Her phone rang. It was Victoria. Simone, you need to see this. The company's shares soared after we announced the Phoenix program. It looks like the market is ready for a new era of leadership. Simone smiled, picking up the velvet box. Inside, there wasn't a ring as she had expected, but a key. Enclosed was a note from Ethan. To our new beginning, the beach house is waiting for you. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Simone watched the city that had become the stage for her transformation. The empire she had built was no longer just about financial success. It was about change, about inspiration, about leaving a legacy. The journey was not over. In fact, it had only just begun. But now she wasn't walking alone. She had an army of women at her side who were determined to rewrite the rules of the game. And what about that key? Well, some stories deserve a new chapter. The beach house in Malibu was exactly as Ethan had described it, a modern haven of glass and wood, where the Pacific Ocean seemed to merge with the horizon. Simone watched the waves break on the sand as she held her steaming cup of coffee, reflecting on the events of the last week. Leonardo's divorce papers have arrived, Rebecca informed her over the phone. Olivia finally managed to annul the prenuptial agreement after we proved the financial frauds. The news was yet another symbol of liberation, not just for Olivia, but for all the women who had been manipulated by Leonardo over the years. And there's more, Rebecca continued. The Phoenix program has received international support. We have investors from Europe and Asia wanting to replicate the model. Simone smiled, remembering the previous day's meeting with the program's first group of mentors, powerful women, each with their own story of overcoming, now united to change the corporate landscape. An alert on her phone caught her attention. It was time for the video conference with Victoria, who was coordinating the launch of the Women's Investment Fund. "Simone," Victoria began, her face on the screen revealing restrained enthusiasm, "3 of Wall Street's top female executives have just joined the fund's board. They say it's time for women to invest in women." The afternoon brought Ethan to the beach house, carrying plants for the garden they planned to build together. It was his way of saying that he was there to stay, to build something lasting. "Have you seen the news?" he asked, as they planted lavender in the garden. "Leonardo has agreed to cooperate with the investigations. It seems that there is a much larger network of corporate corruption than we imagined." Simone paused for a moment, her hands dirty with dirt. "You know what's ironic? He always said that I needed him to survive in the corporate world. Now he's the one who needs to cooperate to survive in prison." The sun was beginning to set when Olivia arrived for the dinner they had planned. She brought with her a bottle of champagne and some important news. "The Federal Council on Business Ethics wants us to lead a task force," she announced, as Ethan poured the glasses. "They want to establish new protocols to prevent harassment and manipulation in the corporate environment." "It's more than a protocol," Simone replied, watching the ocean through the windows. "It's a silent revolution." Later, after Olivia had left and Ethan had fallen asleep, Simone remained on the balcony, listening to the sound of the waves. Her phone vibrated with a message from Rebecca. "I've just received the final figures. The company's market value has tripled since the crisis, but it wasn't the figures that made his heart fill with pride. It was knowing that each woman who went through the Phoenix program carried a part of her story with her, not as a victim, but as the protagonist of her own transformation. The sea breeze brought with it promises of new beginnings. On the balcony table, the plans for Wellness Revolution's international expansion awaited review. Next to it, the small velvet box Ethan had given her now held not only the key to the beach house, but also a ring, a symbol of true partnership, based on mutual respect and admiration. The empire she had built had become something much bigger than herself. It was a beacon of hope, a living testament that it is possible to rebuild from the ashes and emerge stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And what about Leonardo? Well, some people need to lose everything to understand that true power doesn't come from control over others, but from the ability to inspire positive change in the world. The night progressed, and with it, the certainty that each difficult chapter in his life had only been preparation for the legacy he was now building, a legacy of strength, dignity, and, above all, freedom. At a crucial moment in history, Simone had to choose between accepting Leonardo's proposal to save her company or facing him publicly, risking losing everything she had built. She chose the harder path, exposing the truth, and this decision ended up not only saving her company, but inspiring other women to do the same.
We'd love to hear if you're excited about this story. If you had a good time watching the video, go ahead and press 1. If that's not the case, just press 0. Your feedback truly motivates me to collect more heartwarming and significant stories. I'm going to turn this one over to you. What do you make of this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, support, and time mean the world to me.